having an eviction notice served, a tenant, or not the tenant, the landowner, the lessee, or the lessor, let me get that correctly. The lessor can have, if they know that they're going to be evicting somebody, can have a dumpster placed on his property at his acknowledgement, because it's his property. Now, he doesn't put trash inside the dumpster. If the tenant who's leaving it has been served with an eviction notice, wishes to use that dumpster and dumps everything inside of it, then the possession question goes away, because the landowner himself did not put it inside the dumpster. You see what I'm saying? So I've seen that done before. Now, secondly, next question I have, Marshall, is you mentioned that I know you guys do a number of evictions. How many of these evictions where we're encountering problems that Mr. Boudreaux are talking about, say in a 6-month period, where we have mounds of stuff at the corner?
Well, we don't see that in city court, but Mr. Terry, we might have 75 evictions on one Thursday.
Right. But how many of those evictions will result in having a whole pile of debris where somebody's been kicked out and all that? You see what I'm getting at?
Not that many. And this eviction process is getting worse in numbers. You get these big apartment complexes where you got college students.
Right.
They leave with the good stuff, and then the trash is in the apartment. So they put it to the street.
Well, and we understand it. It is an issue and it's a problem. I understand that and I acknowledge that, but I'm trying to get an idea wrap around how much of a problem we talking about that we're going to go to possibly some extremes to fix this, or enact legislations or regulations that's going to curtail this. I mean, Marshall, how many of these do you think in a 6 months period?
It's really hard to guess at.
So basically,
are we talking 2, 3 in a 6 month period?
Where you have a large amount of stuff.
Where you have anything more than 500?
Some days you have nothing. We had one last week. We had 2 households. Every room was full. And they called us at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon.
Right.
To put the stuff out.
Right.
2 households.
Asking him, because I want to make sure he's answering the right question.
Right.
Because I know there's more than that in my community.
Right.
Mr. Picard, their job is to get it out the house. They don't go back to see how long it stays there
Afterwards.
necessarily.
Right.
So I don't know if you're asking him. I would like to ask him, how often do you all have to have things taken out the house? Not necessarily how many of these, stay there for long periods of time. I don't know if, that's not what you do.
Right.
But I think the more appropriate question is, how often do you all have to remove it out the home, or you have to stand by while it is being removed?
I'd say about 15, 20% of the time.
All right, hang on a second.
So-
Here's my question. Mr. Guidry, you can answer this because you've been telling us you're the ones who's getting paid to pick it up.
Yeah.
How many in the past 6 months have you been having to be paid by LCG to go and do this?
Oh, none. LCG's never contacted me to collect an eviction.
Mr. Pope?
We can do our best to count. In the past 6 months, we don't have a classification in our electronic reporting that says evictions, but we can count. I would venture a guess, in the busy season, not in the winter, everything slows down in the winter.
Right.
2 dozen, 2 to 3 dozen.
A year.
That there is a pile at the street that has resulted from an eviction in a 6 month period. I'll do my best to count in the past year how many eviction proceedings we've dealt with.
And then we don't know if it's more or less than $500 at that point, too.
Actually, we quite honestly, Allied does a fine job, but we don't hire Allied Waste. We have contractors that we use
Right.
to clean property and cut grass. We can use those contractors because they have dump trailers and they can go to a transfer station that the general public cannot go to.
No.
So, pardon me? Yes, sir. In Iberia Parish, Mr. Sheldon. Yes, sir.
No.
So when we need Allied, that provision was written, the amendment to the contract for storm debris. So Allied could pick up storm debris, and when we needed them, I believe they picked up a refrigerator full of rotten meat for us. You need a professional solid waste company to go and deal with that, get it in the truck and get it out, get the health threat gone. So
And,
that's
and look,
why.
I want to be very clear because if this were right next to my house, as Mr. Boudreaux knows, or anybody else's, you would want it taken care of as soon as possible. Okay? You remember the NIMBY technique? Not in my backyard. It doesn't affect you unless it's right in your realm of possessions. So if it is an issue, then it's something that needs to be looked at. But I've heard tonight we got to talk as to whether we're in conflict with state law. We have other issues, possible things that Mr. Boudreaux had mentioned, solutions. But let's not make it complicated. If there's an easy fix, which we're trying to find out, then that's something absolutely we need to look at first and foremost before we start penalizing or having more regulations that can be implemented on the people here in Lafayette. But I do understand what Mr. Boudreaux is saying, and I agree with him. If it's something that's there, then we need to figure out a way to remove it or have someone remove it and find out who's responsible for it. Thank you all. That's all I have.
That's it? All right, thank you. Councilman Andy Nakane.
Just going back to what Mr. Pope was saying, and the fact that if we could come up with a solution where the property actually reverted back to the lessor, then he would be responsible for the couches and everything else in there. I'm sure there's a lot of organizations locally, such as Goodwill and Cups, that would pick those pieces up and be a donation. And the lessor could write that donation off also. So there's ways around these problems, I think, even though they seem huge. If you take a bite of that elephant a little bit at a time, you can get rid of it. And that's what we need to do. And I think part of it has to be starting at the level to where we can get that law changed to where the lessor takes possession of the lessee's property with advance notice, enough notice. And that way it becomes his responsibility and address what Mr. Boudreaux was saying, address what you guys were saying. It would clean it up. I think that's where we need to head with this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Nakane. Councilman Boudreaux.
Barbara and Judy, could y'all come up, please? And,
Thank you.
because Barbara's our
Marshall.
justice, one of our justices of the peace, and Judy is one of our constables. And I've asked them to come because, as you could see, the city dynamics as it relates to this versus the unincorporated area, the main thing that I would like to find out from you all, because again, I really want a clean document. And if we're going to have a full appreciation for this, the evictions of notice is one thing, and there's a large number of properties that are simply abandoned where the landlord will do the same thing as in the case of an eviction, where they would take all those contents and put it to roadside. So I don't know if just the definition of eviction is going to be sufficient when we want to get the appropriate numbers of how many of these we deal with. But Barbara and Judy, as it relates to the unincorporated area in the parish, could you give us an idea of what you're seeing, number one, and number two, if any of the things that you have heard here would present a problem from you as it relates to the execution of documents and the execution of removal?
Well, the laws are more or less the same for everybody. It's the same for everybody. But when my constable goes out, the service of days is the same thing. But when my constable goes out, and Judy, she's not in my court, but she's in one of the courts, under another justice of the peace. When she goes out and puts everything on neutral ground, once she leaves, the landlord takes care of picking that up. He collected a down payment. He collected money before he came in, a deposit. Yeah,
The deposit, yeah.
Right. You know, and it's going to stay there if somebody doesn't pick it up. As long as the constable is there, they can't touch it. But once the constable leaves, it needs to be cleaned up. That's his responsibility to clean it up.
Do you all execute any of that within the notification, or is it just kind of an individual's perspective just doing this? You've had that type of success because of the individuals, or is this something
Understood.
that you all execute in your documents?
It's understood. When the landlord comes in and files a suit, they'll ask, who takes care of that now, or after the execution, who takes care of that now? Well, it's your responsibility. You know, once we leave, they're either gonna dig in and make a bigger mess, and it's right there on your yard anyway, even on it's neutral ground, it's more or less close to his property. It's gonna end up on his property. So once we leave, they can pick it up. Somebody's gonna pick it up.
And you make an interesting point with all of I guess, the defining moments that I observe. I would like to see what law enforcement agency would charge someone with theft if they went into that property.
Not
We was
theft.
No, what I'm saying, listen, hear me out. We have tried to take a position here today by saying that, oh, if I touch it, I might be in violation of this if I do this with it. Well, what Barbara just indicated, when you leave, okay, the landowner pretty much could do what they want. They take on that responsibility. Well, let's say when you leave, someone was driving down the street and they say, oh, look, that chair. I'm going to take it. Well, my question is, how many people are going to file a police report and how many law enforcement are going to go and file theft charges against that person because they took a chair out of a trash pile stacked at the road?
Can't.
When it's
understand
an
what I-
eviction, it's not theft.
It's not.
It's not theft. When
They
it's
do
an
it every
eviction. You know, once, I don't let them take it while I'm there in case the tenant would come back. But once I'm gone, anybody can take it.
So is that your time stamp? Once you gone, that time expires as to what they could
Exactly.
claim?
Exactly. No, they can come get it. But once I leave, if it's not there and somebody else took it, it is not theft. And it's up to the landlord.
It's viewed like abandoned property.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. It is abandoned
It's
property.
abandoned property.
Once their time limit is up, it's abandoned property. You're leaving, you can't leave your furniture in there. We've gone through the process. It's gonna keep snowballing if we keep playing with it.
It's
We
not that
put
they
it
don't
out,
know.
take care of it.
It's not that they don't know. They've been served, you know, they've been contacted.
Yeah.
You know, they choose not to come get it for one reason or another. And, but when it's a house full of furniture, I'll tell the landlord, call Goodwill. You know, bring it to Goodwill, call Goodwill, they'll come pick it up, or you can bring it to Goodwill. Because we've notified the tenant, they just refuse, they will not come for whatever reason.
I mean, they've been picking up rent, they've been collecting rent for the past 2 years. Now they're putting them out. They've got all this deposit. They're not returning the deposit. You know, use that money to have it picked up, to have it cleaned up. But 90% of the time, by the time a constable leaves, within the next 2-3 hours, there's a mess.
It's gone, yeah.
So most of the time, the landlord's going to be there with a trailer or dumpster or something to get it picked up once the constable leaves.
How many evictions are y'all doing on,
Depending on what area you're in, Broussard doesn't have that many evictions, but some of our areas might do 200 evictions a year.
how many?
200 evictions a year.
200 a year?
Yeah.
In a particular ward?
Yeah, in some of the wards. You know, like maybe Ward, I don't want exactly, Ward 5,
Right,
4
right.
probably, and Ward,
Jackson Square and.
yeah,
Gilbert
Ward
Pond.
8 do more.
How many have you, on, and this is average, obviously, you're not going to be able to give me a specific number. How many of those would you say are causing you to have the contents placed at curbside as opposed to a voluntary evacuation of the property?
Times a year,
2 or 3 times a year, and
at the most.
that's parish-wide?
Well, it's,
It-
yeah,
Yours.
in our area. And I think we're more or less the same thing. Maybe the bigger apartment complexes might have a little more
Yeah,
problems, but they have their own dumpsters that they use also after everybody's gone. There's not much to throw away once to go through it. There's not much left.
Yeah.
Once she leaves and they go through it, there's not much to throw away. It's the junk.
But when you say once she leave, you're saying that's only 2 or 3 times a year?
Right. And then there's the times where there's the mobile homes that you're moving also, that you'll asked about. But that's an easy eviction.
Yeah.
Get it picked up.
So you are not really experiencing the same problems?
We don't make it a
As
problem.
much.
If you let it go, it snowballs. I mean, you just, if one doesn't pick it up, then it just snowballs. I mean, there has to be a line. You have to stop it somewhere. You know, it has to be ended. You can't just leave it there and leave it there and leave it there. I mean, somebody has to pick it up. I mean, does Mr. Castillo want to leave his property dirty for the next month? It's not going to look good to do another ring, you know? Your rentals are going to go down then.
Okay. Anything else y'all want to add?
That's like putting it in storage. He was saying you could put it in, who would store it?
Who's going to store that? I don't have the
And
storage for
who,
that.
you know, like, who
Who
would
put it
store
in
it?
storage?
Like Mr. Bertrand was saying, you know, they could put it in storage, but who's gonna store it?
Who's gonna
You
pay
know, like who, you know, they've already been evicted, so, you know, they just didn't come pick up their stuff, so who would store it? The constable can't store it, you know, like, we don't have room to store it. And then we'd be responsible if something,
Right.
you know, that's just one thing.
Let him respond to that.
Okay.
What I was referring to was an example I saw in another county or in another state, and it was based on the value. Somebody had to make a value judgment on what was there, but, you know, by virtue of the fact that we're putting it on common ground, which is usually belongs to the local jurisdiction, you know, pretty much assumes that it's abandoned property to begin with, and I would imagine in most cases, as we were all talking and you were talking, it's probably not going to sit out on the ground very long. People are going to walk away with it, and somebody's going to end up with a trash pile. But, you know, I think I think what's not dealt with in our ordinance is the abandonment of property. And it appears to me that we have abandoned property, and it needs to be given some type of classification.
And most of the time, when we have these evictions, the utilities already shut off, you know, they're gone. You know, utilities are shut off, and they have no life is going on in there at all. Most of the time, you go in there, and the key's on the counter. You know, so they meant to leave the stuff in a lot of cases.
All right. Well, thank y'all very much. And I want to thank everyone who came out, because this was, I would say, a very informative process. And I think that we have some requests that we could put forth, and it seemed like the majority of which will go to legal. I would like the idea that Mr. Bertrand brings up to look at something to be put into our ordinance as it relates to abandoned property, to afford the protection, whether it's to EQ, Allied as a service provider, or even a landlord themselves who may want to put a trailer out and collect the goods themselves. I would also make sure that we have a timeline of removal to see how can we get the notification and the filing process to be part of the timeline for those contents to be considered either still in someone's possession or abandoned at that time. I would like to officially, Madam Clerk, send a reminder to the marshal that each and every eviction that they have to do a judgment of possession on and actually go out, that they notify EQ of that location. Send a notification to EQ so they could have advance notice in the event that we would ultimately have to contract that cleanup. I'm not going to ask for any ordinances at this time. Based on all of that, I would like to get that additional research done and those opinions generated. And Madam Clerk, I would like to publish an ad online at our website, as well as put an ad in our journal or in the appropriate paper, or a public service announcement, asking for interested parties, in particular landlords who are interested in possibly sitting with me and whoever else is interested, to look at some ideas that they may have to assist in how do we get these properties clean in the most expedient manner possible. And I think that's going to be all my requests for at this time. And make sure that all of the individuals who came out today, especially the agencies that don't fall under the umbrella of LCG, but we're partners with like the Marshal, Allied, Justice of the Peace and the constables, that they be notified of as we go forward, that they remained informed of what's happening as it relates to some of these findings.
Is that it, Councilman Boudreaux?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you so much. Great discussion. Councilman Bertrand, you lit up. Did you mean to speak, or you want me to clear the floor?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. All right. Let me clear the floor right quick. All right. Okay, moving right along, ordinance for final adoption. Jeremy, can you please read?
Ordinance 15, 2014, an ordinance of the Lafayette City Parish Council amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance so as to reclassify the property of Boulay Pellerin Baudouin, case number ZON 2014-1, Boulay Pellerin Baudouin, Robley Drive property rezoning located generally south of Robley Drive and east of Cobb Road from single-family residential to condominium, townhouse, and zero lot line homes.
Got a motion by Councilman Andy Nakane, second by Councilman Patin. Any council discussion? Seeing none, any blue cards?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. Call for the roll, please.
District 2? District 3? Yes. District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7?
Yes.
District 8?
Yes.
District 9?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
All right. Make sure all the mics are on. All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Good night. Be safe on the road.
Andy,